Good evening. Uh, Back again. Sunday night, 27th, 25th. I'm sorry, 25th. Sunday night, 25th. Um, Sitting here, got so many things I want to say and so many different directions I want to go. I have to stop and think for a minute. Where do I want to start? Well, uh, before I start, I think you need to kind of understand this is for everybody, the general audience, obviously, but also it's for my family because these are part of my legacy that I'm leaving behind, so they can. A lot of the little ones will never know who I was because they're the great grandchildren now are. I've only seen them a couple of times. They probably likely won't see me much the rest of my life. So uh, they really won't have a chance to sit down and talk with great grandpa. So, because they all live in faraway places. One family lives in, of all places, Minnesota. My God, I can't even believe being there now. But anyway, yeah, the weather is one thing, but what's going on there now is quite another. Um, so, a little bit of history about where I came from and uh, what I did for my occupation through the years. I do a blog, by the way, and the blog has been I've been doing a blog for years. It's called Steel Pencil. The reason it's called Steel Pencil is because I have an extensive background in steel construction, and I also love to write, and so I combined the two to give myself a moniker, Steel Pencil, and that's what I write under on WordPress. And quite a few of you have probably read some of my articles on steel pencil, and I love to write. It's one of my favorite things. But back again, where I started in the steel industry, I started when I was actually in high school because I was taking vocational drafting in high school, and then as part of the program for vocational drafting, I worked a half a day, and I went to school a half day and worked half day in an actual steel fabrication shop as a draftsman's apprentice. And I also took vocational drafting, like I said, in high school. So I was laying the foundation for, and I didn't really realize it at the time, but I was laying the foundation for what the rest of my life was going to be, and how I was going to support myself. So a side note, I wasn't a school person, and I didn't really care for school that much. It was I was sitting in class and want to be outside. I hated being indoors. I loved being outdoors my whole life, and I was not an indoors person. So uh, I was one of those people one of those kids that would sit in class and stare out the window. I want to be out there. I don't want to be in here. But anyway, I made it through school fine. I got average grades, and uh, several of the things that I really liked in school were grammar and words and spelling and that kind of thing. And I liked geometry. I loved geometry. And then I loved drafting and that kind of stuff. And I blended my art talents with my drafting, and that worked out really well. Uh, so after graduating from school, I can remember sitting in the parking lot where we had our graduation ceremonies out in front of our school on May the 28th, 1959. I was never so glad anything was over in my life. I was so glad school was over. And a lot of my friends were going off to college. I did not want to go to college. I didn't want to go in another classroom for a long time. I had my fill of classrooms and 12 years of school. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea what I was going to do for a living. So I graduated in May and took some time off. Had some fun in the summertime, but it was really strange because all of my friends that I used to hang out with and have fun with were all moving away and going off to college, and I was kind of left alone, kind of wandering the streets by myself, and wondering, oh, this isn't any fun. So we still a few guys hanging around and the gals, and we had a lot of fun. Uh, but I had to get serious about what I was going to do to earn money. You need to earn money, especially if you lived with my mother. Uh, my mother had strict rules in her house. Uh, when you graduate from high school, you have two choices. You either go to work or you move out. So, and then the other thing that went with that, if you stay here, if you go to work and stay here, then you got to pay me room and board, and I'm okay with that. That's fine. And but she said if you go to school, if you go to college, you can live here rent free. I that was that was a no brainer. I had no intention of going to college, so I had to go to work. So my father had worked in a huge steel company for years. Matter of fact, he spent his whole life there. He went to work there as a young man, and he uh, retired from there. And it was a huge company, 5 acres under roof, 200 men working there. They built gigantic boilers for oil refineries, and they built AT&T communication towers. They built high-rise buildings. It was a gigantic operation. And so I went to work there, and I remember the day I walked in, and I was like, holy cow, everything in here is huge. Wasn't anything in there that was small. Everything was gigantic. Uh, the, the building had train tracks that went through it, and actually, you could be working in a diesel locomotive would be coming through the shop pulling 2 or 3 freight cars. So it was like it was massive. It was massive. But the fact that it was massive was right down my alley. I loved that. I loved all the big machinery, the trains. I mean, it was my kind of thing. Uh, and so I was lucky because I had the background I had with working in vocational drafting, working half a day as a draftsman's apprentice. And my father taught me how to read shop drawings when I was younger. He used to bring them home and teach me how to read them. So uh, God bless him. He knew he was preparing me for what I was gonna do in my life. I didn't even know that. So anyway, uh, went to work and worked there for a short period of time, and I was working as a grunt. I was a low man one of the low guys on the totem pole. I was the fetch it guy, carry it over there, bring it over here, stack it over there, that kind of guy. And I didn't want to be that kind of guy. I wanted to be the guys that were working out there and building things and doing things. So uh, it was a union shop. So they had what they called setups. So if you had the experience and you thought you could do the job, and they would post new jobs on the bulletin board, and you could look at those new jobs, and if you thought you could qualify for those new jobs, you could sign up for them, and they would look at your qualifications, and if they thought that you had the right stuff, you could go and start, and you could do that job. They would teach you, and it was a great plan because you didn't have to be a grunt forever. You could move up, move up to stay up, and move up in your wages. So there was a opening came up for 2 layout men, and that, by the way, the layout man was the top. He's the cream. He's the best guy in the shop. He's got the best money. He's got the best job. So I'm only there a short period of time when these 2 job openings came up. I obviously I applied for it because I had the credentials, and they gave me the job. So I became an apprentice layout man, and I'm telling you, it was a wonderful opportunity for me. Another thing that really helped me was my father had been there all those years, and those guys that worked there had been there for years and years, and they were my father's friends. And so my dad, my dad's friends would come to me and say, "Come over here, and we'll show you how to do this, or we'll show you how to do that." And some of them gave me tools that, and I didn't have a lot of money to buy tools. Some of them gave me their own personal tools that they'd had for years. Uh, Sad thing about that is that I bought tools from those guys as well. I had a collection of tools that were the best you could buy, the best quality tools you could buy, and I got them either given to me as a gift or sold to me at a very good price, a very reasonable price. Later, I worked in a shop in California, and this is why I have no use for drug addicts. I worked in a shop in California, and one of the guys that worked there was a heroin addict, and he came in one night and stole everybody's tools and sold them. He sold them to a fence that same night, and I never saw those tools again. And they meant a lot to me because I got them from friends and accomplices from my father, men that he had known all his life, and they were good people. And it took one drug addict to make them all disappear. So anyway, back to the story. Um, I got my job. I got my setup. They made me apprentice, apprentice layout guy, and so I served. It was a 2-year apprenticeship, and immediately I've got my eyes set on the West Coast. I say when I get this apprenticeship finished, I'm not staying here because I can make 3 times the money in California. So, like a good boy, I worked hard. I, I I did everything I was supposed to do. In 2 years, come 2 years, I got my journeyman's card in a Boilermakers Union, and bid adieu. I'm going to the West Coast. Thanks for thank you for everything, but I'm going where the sun shines. So I went to Southern California and set up residence there and continued my career. So California was a whole different place, and it was very competitive, very fast paced, all totally different from Oklahoma. Oklahoma was very laid back and leisurely. So, but California was a fast paced, competitive shop, and you had to work hard to keep your job. And they didn't mess around with you, even though you were union. And but I didn't wasn't very successful in staying in the Boilermakers Union. Uh, it was a tough union to break into in California. So I joined the ironworkers, and I got a job as a union iron worker, and I stayed a union iron worker the rest of my career in Southern California. Not out there in the field climbing buildings, but in the shop as a shop union iron worker. And so it didn't take long for me to uh, get a job as a temporary foreman when our general foreman went on vacation. Uh, they asked me to step in while he was gone, and I did that a couple of times, and I thought, this is what I want to do. And so I found a job as a shop foreman in another shop, and that started my career off as as a foreman. And I was either a foreman or a superintendent the rest of my career. Uh, so uh, it was a lot better being on the top of the pecking order than down below. So uh, that's where I led crews for the balance of my career, and it was a very good career. Uh, obviously, obviously, when you get to that level, and you get that level, and you're in a shop, you want to get to the next level. The next level is in the office as an estimator. So I wanted to, that was my goal, is to become an estimator. Back to that never satisfied thing. Never satisfied doing this. I want to be up there. I want to be doing that up there. So I got a job as a shop superintendent for a company in California, and they had a lot of, they sold, the company was bought out by another, uh, there's another story that goes with this, okay? Let me tell you the story that goes with this. So they were purchased by a guy with a lot of money, obviously. And so I got to know that guy fairly well, not that much, but he was a pretty straightforward guy. So I went to work for him, and I worked there as an estimator's apprentice. And then I finally got up to the point where I was, they don't call him that, but I became a journeyman estimator, so a professional estimator. I was good enough to, I knew the business well enough that it was pretty easy for me to do that. So I actually moved on. I left that job and I went to another job. And I met a fella down at the other job who was a union iron worker. We became really good friends. So one day I'm in my office. He walks in. He says, we're doing a job down in Santa Ana, and we're going to use a helicopter to set the steel. And he said, why don't you come down on Saturday and hang out and watch what's going on down there. She said, I think you'll really enjoy it. So as I walk up to the job site, the guy who owned that company was there, the prior company I worked for. He was there, and he was there with his wife. And I walked up and stood beside him. She's she's a very, very nice looking woman with a, this is back before the the fur people came in and made a big fuss about mink coats, okay? She was there with a full length mink coat, and beautiful woman. And I walked up and stood beside him, and he said, I'd like for you to meet my wife, Hetty. And I said, okay. So he introduced me to her. The bell never went off. It just never rang. It was Hetty Lamar. And I'm sure she probably wasn't very happy the fact that I didn't have any idea who she was. But she was a little bit ahead, before my time, but she was still a beautiful woman. And so I actually met Hedy Lamarr face to face and shook hands with her. And so that's one of the crazy things that happened in my life along the way. But I continued on down the road, and of course, you get to that point where, okay, I'm at the top of my craft. So, what's the next step? Being never satisfied, the next step is you have to be an owner. That's the top. That's a very high. That's the very top of the stack. So, I became an owner. Unfortunately, I became an owner in a partnership from hell. And years ago, one of my good friends who owned a business told me, he said, don't ever get in a partnership. He said that's marriage without sex. And I became fully aware of that in the 2 years that I was in that partnership. It was one of the worst experiences I'd ever had in my life. I would never get in a partnership with anybody for anything, ever. So take my advice. If anybody says, let's do a partnership, don't do it. You're way better off doing it solo. But as it turns out, these guys turned against me behind my back and orchestrated. They asked me to come in. They were in another business, actually, in a related steel business. They came and asked me to establish a steel fabrication shop on their property, and I would become part owner. So I did that. We put the shop together, got all the equipment together, hired a crew. We were rocking and rolling, just doing great. And lo and behold, things started turning sour. They hired a guy who said he was some kind of from the banking industry or whatever, and he was supposed to be this financial guru, supposed to make everything great. So we started having weekly production meetings. That's another thing. If anybody tells you they want to have weekly production meetings, watch out. They're looking to slice. They're looking to cut somebody out of the program. That's probably what's going to happen. So anyway, I attended those meetings, and they started giving me these dire reports of how my company was doing. Your side of the company is not doing that well, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. So I finally said, "We're going to shut your side of the company down. We're not going to do that anymore." Oh, really? Now we're not going to do that anymore. So I said sayonara, walked out with my money, and they laid off all my crew, everything, and laid off my foreman, and who was a friend of mine, laid off my foreman, and so we all went our own way. And lo and behold, a week or 2 weeks after I left, everybody came back to work except me. So the guy that was the banker that they hired to orchestrate all this stuff, talk about karma. He went in, and this is back in the 80s. This is when computers were just barely making the scene in normal everyday offices. And this guy was supposed to know all about computers. So he's put computers in everybody's office, put everybody on the network, blah, 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 blah. So then uh, I left, and about 6 months, 8 months later, maybe a year, the place burned down. Well, the guy that they hired to take me out, he was embezzling money from the company And when they got onto him, he came in at night and destroyed all the computers and burned the office down. That's the best example of karma I've ever seen. That was really great. But in the meantime, I'd had enough of California, and I said I don't want to be here anymore. There's been too many bad experiences. The state not is not what it used to be. I'm out of here. So I took my wife and I moved to Seattle. Uh, that's Seattle is Los Angeles without the sun. That's basically what it is. It has the same congestion. The freeways are crowded. Everything. It's just Los Angeles without the sun, basically. And the politics are about as bad. But anyway, I established a shop up there. I got acquainted with everybody. Established a shop up there, and I was had a very successful shop going up there for several years. And then uh, I decided to, in the end, I decided to wrap it up and quit just beating myself to death trying to keep the thing going, because it's a lot of work. Operating a business is a lot of work all the time. You work hours and hours and hours. Just the rewards are not what you put into it. So I closed it down and moved back down to Oregon. Moved to Oregon, and I've been here ever since. Oregon's good. Oregon's a beautiful state. Uh, Politics are not much better, but not much better than Seattle or LA. But Oregon itself is a beautiful state. Really, really nice people. And I think I finally found my home where I want to stay the rest of my life, which is not going to be a long time. But anyway, so it's you just have to laugh about that stuff, when you get this age. You say talk about the future. It's like, okay, you don't have no idea. The future's not going to be really way out there. It's pretty close. It's like the guy says, "Are we at the end of the world?" He says, "No, but you can see it from here." Are we at the end? No, but you can see it from here. So, anyway, guys and gals, that's my episode for today. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to move on to some different subjects next week or next time I do a video. You know enough about this old man now. So we're going to talk about some other things. My my daughters don't like my politics. So I like to talk about politics. My daughters don't like to. They don't like to talk about politics, but it's one of my favorite subjects. But I think next time we're going to talk about the state of the United States and where it is now compared to where it was when I was growing up, and what's going on and how it got there. Uh, it's not good. We're going in the wrong. We're going really in the wrong direction. But I think Mr. Trump has turned the ship a little bit. Not completely turned around yet, but he's turned the ship a little bit, and we're headed in the right direction again. We just There's a lot of things that need to be fixed, but I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to do that in the future, whatever that future is. So listen, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I can't wait to do the next one. It's great fun. It's totally unscripted. I'm just sitting here talking to you like we would if we were out having a cigar and a beer. Which, by the way, I like to have a cigar and a beer. So we'll just call this our cigar and beer session. So you guys have a good night, have a good week, and I'll see you next week.